My name is Peter, and welcome to another video about sailing vessel Silverheels, My Rhodes 22. Today is May 17th, and we are still involved in various projects on the boat in preparation for the sailing season. And this video in particular is going to focus on various aspects of rigging. And to start that discussion, I want to look at changes I've made in how I've rigged the furling and unfurling of the IMF mainsail. So the red line that runs along the boom is the unfurling line for the main. And the way General Boats rigs that is the bitter end is tied off here at the end of the boom, and the line runs forward to a car at the clew of the main, and then the line runs back again to the aft end of the boom. And in the way they rig it, it's the end of the line is secured here at the end of the boom, and I found that inconvenient, so I run the line forward again to the gooseneck, and then down to a block at the base of the mast, and then to another block tied off to the handrail, and then back to a cam cleat on the cabin top. So I made that change to the unfurling line on the main at the beginning of last season, and had it in place all summer, and found that it worked quite well. I found it to be an improvement over the original rigging. And I wanted to do something similar with the furling line. Now, there was a video that I did last fall about replacing the furling line for the IMF, which required having the mast down and then pulling out the whole IMF assembly from the bottom of the mast, which then allowed the line to be replaced. And I needed to do that because I needed a longer line. And I'll show you how that's rigged now. So the way it was before, the furling line came out of this slot on the bottom side of the boom, and you would just pull it directly, and that would have the effect of turning the spool inside the mast, which would roll the sail in, and you'd cleat that off here under the boom. The problem with this approach is that with the pop top up and the bimini also up, there wasn't much room to work with this line. So I also wanted to lead that directly back to the cockpit. So I installed this pulley on the underside of the boom. And so now the line, instead of coming straight back towards the rear of the boat, is redirected again up to the gooseneck. And it runs through a block at the gooseneck and another block at the base of the mast. And again to a block that's tied off to the handrail, and back to a cam cleat at the aft of the cabin top. So this new arrangement for the furling line hasn't been tested underway, but a little testing here on the hard shows that it's going to work out okay. But of course, I can't ever really leave anything alone, so I want to make some modifications to the details of how these lines are rigged. And we're going to go back to the base of the mast to start that story. So here's our block for the unfurling line at the base of the mast. And the furling line is situated similarly, and that's just screwed in here. But the change I'm going to make is I added this piece of hardware underneath the mast base this year. This is called a halyard organizer, and I got it from Dwyer, who Stan in General Boats uses for some of their standing rigging. And this has holes in it so that we can attach blocks to that rather than having the holes in the deck. And part of the rationale for this is I think it looks cool. But the other is there's some additional blocks I want to attach here at the base of the mast, and I'd rather take this approach with a halyard organizer rather than having to keep drilling holes in the deck here. So, pretty simple matter. We're just going to move this block and its counterpart on the other side to the aftmost hole on the halyard organizer. So, looking from inside the cabin now, there are our two IMF furling and unfurling line blocks attached to our halyard organizer, and that's all looking quite ship-shape, I believe. But we're not done, of course. Since, as I mentioned, I have several lines in mind to run down the mast through a block here at the halyard organizer and then back to the cockpit. And this solution of the block attached to the handrail won't work with multiple lines. So we're thinking along the lines of one of these doohickeys, one on each side. This is a deck line organizer, so it's got multiple pulleys in it and will get screwed to the deck. And that will serve the same purpose as this pulley, to turn the rope around the around the hatch opening here, and then back to the aft edge of the cabin. So we'll need to play around some to figure out exactly where these are going to go. Moving back to the base of the mast for a moment, I should have pointed out that removing the hardware here from adjacent to the mast has left some holes, and we'll fill those with some West Systems epoxy and put a little gel coat on them after cleaning this area up, of course. So hopefully that will repair that bit of damage. Won't be invisible, but... So I've decided on the location for the deck organizer. So it's time to drill a hole in the cabin top. I'm a little nervous about doing this, and one of the points is I don't know what's between the upper and lower skin of the cabin top. But I guess there's one way to find out. Well, I can't be 100% sure, but it looks like some kind of wood fiber. And it seems like there's about 7/8 of an inch of depth there. The drill bit stopped going in easily at about that depth, so I'm guessing I hit the top side of the lower skin. I was pretty sure I was going to go this way anyway, but seeing what I've seen here, the approach we're going to take is sometimes called drill, fill, drill. So we're going to position holes for these two deck organizers, and then we're going to drill holes somewhat oversized and fill those with epoxy, and then come back and re-drill. And that should eliminate any possibility of water ingress into the core of the cabin top, which would be a bad thing, of course. So we'll continue along those lines. So it's now the next day. So we did drill out oversized holes and fill them with epoxy, and it went okay. I should have mentioned that this is the first time I've done this, so we didn't bring any experience to the project. And well, I'll show you what we have here. So the actual hole size, finish hole size that we want is 9/64, just over 1/8 of an inch for the number 10 screws that are going to go in here. So we drilled those out somewhat oversized, and then used a Dremel to kind of excavate more core material, and that led to some, you know, kind of sloppy holes, which are going to get covered, so that's not a big deal. And we filled those with epoxy, and I'm not sure this is going to show, but in every one of these holes, the epoxy which I applied to the surface has settled some as it cured overnight. So we're going to have to come back and apply epoxy a second time. So that's not the end of the world, and I think, you know, we're going to end up in a good place, but it just makes the process longer than it would be otherwise. So after a second round of filling the oversized holes with epoxy resin, the resin is once again slightly below the cabin top surface, but it's high enough that I'm fairly confident that the core is completely protected. So we're going to go on to the next step, which is to re-drill our screw pilot holes to hold the two deck fittings in place. So our pilot holes have been re-drilled into the epoxy resin of our over-drilled holes, and I've test fit that the screws do still line up with the holes, and so it's time to actually screw the fitting down to the deck. But we're going to add, as our second line of defense against moisture ingress, small bits of butyl sealant for each of the 4 holes. There, I hope you can see the bits of butyl that I put around each of the 4 screws. There's not a lot, but I've kind of learned that if you apply too much, you have lots of squeeze out to clean up. So I think this is going to be enough, knock wood. So there's the port side in place, and we'll just repeat the same procedure on the starboard side. The starboard side line organizer has also been mounted, and so it's time to rerun some lines. So there is our rerouted IMF main furling line, and the unfurling line for the inner mast furling main. Now, I did mention that one of the reasons for adding the deck organizers is that I had ideas for additional lines to run, and one of which I have here. Some of which is for a potential new head sail that isn't going to happen this year, or at least not right away. But we want to reroute the topping lift, which starts at the aft end of the boom and goes up through one of the sheaves at the top of the mast, the port sheave as it happens, and then General Boats routes that line down to a fitting outboard of the handrail, about halfway back, the pop top, and then back to a cam cleat here. It's not there right at the moment, But I want to instead run that down to a block on the halyard organizer, and then through here, the deck line organizer, and then back. So let's see what that looks like. So I doubt this is going to come out, but the black topping lift now runs through the port sheave, which is to our right, and down alongside the mast to a block on the halyard organizer, and then through the line organizer and back through the same cam cleat it used before. I don't know that that's any better than the way General Brooks rigged it in any meaningful way, but I like it. We're also mounting some chocks here on the forward corners of the cabin to help with guiding lines associated with the whisker pole. And we're going to take a slightly different approach here, since I wasn't all that pleased with the way the last one turned out. So I've just straight out drilled holes that are 3 times the size of the final pilot holes. So these 2 holes are 3/8 of an inch, and again about an inch deep. That seems to be the depth of the core. And we'll come back and fill these with epoxy, probably more than once, and see how that goes. One of the other lessons that I learned in the previous exercise is I should mask a large area around where I'm going to be working here with the epoxy. I managed to avoid having any accidental spills in the other case, but you know, we shouldn't tempt fate, and it seems like the safer route, so we'll do that as well. So here are our epoxy plugs the next day, all cleaned up and ready to go. Something I tried here, which seems to have worked out, is after initially filling the holes with unthickened epoxy, I waited a bit for them to settle, and then came back and topped them off with somewhat thickened epoxy, which is why the material looks a little bit whitish, and that seems to have worked, allowing me to fill the holes in one pass rather than 2. So now we need to drill our screw pilot holes and apply some butyl and screw these guys down. So we've drilled our pilot holes into our epoxy plugs and applied butyl to the base of the screws, and so we're ready to install the hardware. So we've got just a little squeeze out of the butyl, which is a good thing. So we'll come back and clean that up, and then I'll go ahead and set up the whisker pole and see how this theory of running the guy line is going to work out. I was standing in the cabin getting ready to rig the whisker pole when I remembered that I hadn't shown you the base of the mast where we took the hardware out. We moved this block where it had been mounted in these 2 holes, and I did fill those with epoxy and came back and put some gel coat repair on there, and it's not perfect, and I'm sure Stan's crew would do a better job than I did, but it's not too shabby. The whisker pole is rigged with its topping lift and foreguy and after guy. The after guy comes straight back to the fair lead and cam cleat that General Boats puts in this position for the most inboard running of the jib sheets. And so it's serving dual purpose and works out well there. The fore guy goes up and around the bow cleat. Normally the mast winch wouldn't be sitting there, of course. And then comes through our chock there. And the reason there's a chock there and not a fair lead is that I can, standing in the cabin, I can maneuver the line into the chock. But if it was a fair lead, I wouldn't be able to thread the line through the fair lead standing inside the cabin. So after a bit of inspiration, we took that route instead. And coming back here, see, we've got the lines are crossing. And I didn't show this before, but Spinlock, the company that makes the deck organizer, also makes these fair leads that can be attached right to the top. So that's keeping the crossing lines separated from each other. And then the fore guy comes back to the jib sheet fair lead and cam cleat on the other side. So there's that project. There's one more project that I want to tackle before putting the boat in the water. I want to rig what might be most commonly referred to as a flag halyard that will run up to the spreader. I don't actually want it for flags, I want it for a radar reflector. But to do that, I'm going to have to drop the mast. We've got the mast down, though still attached at the base, and we've attached 2 small blocks to the port spreader. And the blocks are standard swivel blocks for 1/4 inch line. I believe that's referred to as a 20 millimeter block. And for attaching the block to the spreader, I've got another bit of hardware that I picked up from McMaster-Carr. It's called a loop clamp, and I'll show you one that's not attached to the spreader so you can see it a little more clearly. So this is what it looks like when it comes from McMaster-Carr. It's actually aluminum, and the rubbery part is neoprene, and it's available in a variety of sizes. This is 7/8 to match the tubing for the spreader, and these tabs are easy to bend so that it forms a more useful shape. I'll put up the part number in the description for this video on YouTube. So now it's time to put the mast back up. So there's our radar reflector hanging from the spreader. Unfortunately, on reading the owner's manual that came with the radar reflector, I find that a wet sail will create what they call a shadow effect, meaning that boats with radar in a position that puts the reflector behind the sail won't get an echo. And so really, to be effective with sails up, you need 2. So I've got another one on order. And I've seen boats with 2 radar reflectors, and I just thought maybe they were belt and suspenders type people, but now I know the reason why. That'll do it for this video. It's getting very close to time to launch the boat. It's after Memorial Day now, so it's really past time. So something in a sail soon.